Study English in Quito, Ecuador. I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. We begin with news from Bolivia. Opposition Senator Janine Áñez has declared herself the interim president as institutional aspects of the coup progress 2 days after President Evo Morales was forced to resign. She swore herself in on Tuesday before no more than 1/3 of the country's parliament in a move deemed illegal and unconstitutional. 2/3 of lawmakers did not part in the session amid ongoing violence which has targeted members and supporters of the movement towards Socialism Party. Áñez says her role as interim president will be temporary until new elections are carried out. Earlier on Tuesday, thousands of residents marched from the city of El Alto to La Paz in rejection to the coup and calling those who carried out as traitors, racists, and anti-democratic. Social movements are rejecting the steps being taken by the influential right-wing sectors, primarily from the Department of Santa Cruz, in their efforts to persecute lawmakers of the MAS party. Meanwhile, police and the armed forces have taken steps to repress El Alto protesters as thousands of them carry the huipala flag, a symbol of the indigenous communities in the country. And during Tuesday night, many Red Poncho members, supporters of Evo Morales, were still at the streets mobilizing against the coup plotters.
We are not afraid of the armed forces, even when they have directly targeted us. And while an indigenous president was in danger, they turned their back on him. That hits us a lot. That's why we are here today. Another thing I want to let our people know is that the military has never won any war in our lands. We are the ones who have secured victory over them in the 2003 gas war. They had their rifles, but we won nothing but our bravery. So we are not afraid of the armed forces or the police, who are traitors.
A public funeral and street procession was held in El Alto, where victims of Monday's confrontations with pro-coup police were being honored. In the audio, the resident who filmed the video puts the blame for the deaths on the police and says that there has been no media reporting of this or documentation of other events surrounding the people's uprising and resistance to the coup which is taking place. The person filming also decries the treatment of the huipala flag, saying they have no understanding of its history. In Brazil, protesters gathered in front of Bolivia's embassy in support of President Morales and to reject the right-wing coup in Bolivia. Chanting, "Evo, you are not alone," supporters are calling for an end to the opposition-backed military violence being perpetrated against Morales supporters in Bolivia. And as the U.S. imperialist machine ramps up its regime change operation, demonstrators are strongly condemning those behind the coup against Bolivia's democratically elected leader. Bolivia's ousted President Evo Morales arrived in Mexico early on Tuesday, where he's being granted political asylum by the government of President Andrés Manuel López Obrador.
I want to tell you that we are very thankful because the President of Mexico have saved our lives. Why did I say that? On the 9th of November, on Saturday, when I arrived in the tropical zone of Cochabamba, a member of the security team of the army informed us and showed me messages and told me of phone calls that they should hand me over in exchange for $50,000 the day before we resigned. And that's why we are very grateful for saving our lives. But I also want to say, brothers and sisters, while I'm alive, we will continue in politics. As long as I live, the struggle will continue And we are sure that the peoples of the world have the right to free themselves, to liberate themselves. We thought we had finished with oppression and discrimination, with humiliation, but it's reappearing with other groups who don't respect life, much less their country. It will be part of the ideological and programmatic struggle and cultural and social struggle. Brothers and sisters, if there is something, if I have committed some crime, it's being indigenous. If the Vice President has committed some crime, it's implementing social programs for the humble and the poorest sectors, seeking social justice. And I'm convinced that there will only be peace when we can guarantee social justice.
And the Organization of American States held an extraordinary session to discuss the ongoing crisis in Bolivia. A representative from the country read a statement by Foreign Minister Diego Pari during the session.
I want to share with you the concern of Ambassador Diego Pari Rodriguez, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and his desire to be present, that we are living in Bolivia and without wishing to imperil his own personal security, he decided against his best wishes, which would have been to come personally. This is why I now proceed to read to you the message that he shares through me with you today. Now wish to say to the Americas and to the world that my country is now the victim of an unfurling of violence and of the rupture of democratic order without precedent. On the 10th of November, President Evo Morales stepped down from the presidency in order not to allow his ongoing presence to be the predicate for ongoing violence or killing of men, women, and children in the country, or for their being victims of racism. He left yesterday, and this with the assistance of the country of Mexico, which granted him asylum. The authorities and former authorities of the government are now, in fact, refugees in various embassies and fear for their physical safety. We therefore beg this Permanent Council to speak out on behalf of the respect for human rights. The authorities have indeed been the victim of any number of acts of violence. Houses are being burnt, various acts of violence have been taking place, and this in a country which is now deprived of its authorities and of its head of state.
And the representative of Bolivia also said that surely the intention of the OAS in its actions was to force out President Evo Morales.
Surely you are not unaware of what has happened. We feel that the concept of fraud, of electoral fraud, and everything that followed have just been excuses, transparent fig leaves that indeed have tried to hide the fact that the
Caribbean nations like Antigua and Barbuda heavily condemned the coup against President Morales and demanded that the OAS acknowledge it.
No statement, declaration, or resolution from this Permanent Council would be fair, objective, and impartial if it does not express grave concern about the military intervention in Bolivia that demanded the resignation of a president legitimately in office and the arrest and detention of several persons. Indeed, since last Sunday, Bolivia has been under the control of a military group.
South Africa's governing party, the African National Congress, has added its voice to progressive organizations that have denounced the coup in Bolivia. A statement by the party's executive committee called the coup a tragic and blatant subversion of the will of the Bolivian people. The ANC has expressed regret that the international community has remained silent in the face of a coup against a democratically elected leader. The party has also condemned external actors who are instigating unconstitutional changes of governments across Latin America. Coming up, workers in Colombia will begin a national strike. Don't go away.
A review of the world news that investigates, incites analysis, and induces criticism, because every event has a context.
Pusimos el punto en la I.
Dot in the eye. Saturdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Brazil's Congress has officially ratified the government's Social Security reform bill into law. President Jair Bolsonaro proposed the reform back in February, alleging it would save the Brazilian state over $190 billion in the next 10 years. The main change is the increase of the retirement age for men and women. Other changes include an increase to workers' pension contributions and the mechanism to calculate benefits. Citizens had been protesting against the bill since it was introduced, saying they would likely die before being able to take advantage of their benefits. The presidents of Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa will meet in the Brazilian capital, Brasilia, this Wednesday for the 11th summit of the BRICS countries, a group that aims to bring together some of the world's largest emerging economies. China's Xi Jinping and South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa arrived in Sao Paulo on Tuesday. It is expected that the presidents begin further talks regarding the expansion of the BRICS New Development Bank, which was launched in 2014. The leaders plan to agree on new projects, which will include the scientific and technological revolution spearheaded by China.
We have every reason to expect and believe that the 11th BRICS summit will mark the beginning of a new golden decade of cooperation, and that the bloc members will speak in a common voice calling for a multilateralism and open world economy.
In other news, at least 19 people died in Peru after the bus they were in went down a ravine in a mountainous area of the country. According to authorities, more than 23 people were also left injured when the bus tumbled down about 300 meters near the town of Otsuco. The driver and the poor state of the vehicle are being blamed for the tragedy. Colombia's workers' unions have called for a national strike on November 21st against President Iván Duque's neoliberal labor and pension reforms.
We have called for a strike on the 21st for the social and political leaders who have been murdered in the country, and also against the murder of the 18 children who were massacred with a bomb by the armed forces. We will do this strike on the 21st to stand against the economic package of this government that seeks to implement pension and labor reforms and to further privatize state enterprises like Ecopetrol. We need to stand against a government that has stigmatized social protest.
Moving to the Caribbean, the British Virgin Islands is mourning the loss of its former premier, Ralph O'Neill, who passed away on Monday. He had been ill for some time. O'Neill, who was about a month shy of his 86th birthday, held the distinction of being the longest-serving premier of the British territory. He had retired from active politics in 2015 after some 40 years as an elected member of parliament, from 1975 through 2015. O'Neill is remembered as a leading Caribbean statesman who commanded great respect among the leaders of the overseas territories. As Trinidad and Tobago prepares for local government polls on December 2nd, the Election and Boundaries Commission said nomination day went off without a hitch on Monday. The ruling People's National Movement and the opposition United National Congress are the only two parties to submit full teams of 139 candidates each. Several small parties are also contesting certain areas. Meanwhile, a few people from both the PNM and UNC are running as independents in crucial battleground areas. Registration Day was a colorful event with some candidates parading to EBC offices to tassa music or accompanied by teams of high-ranking party officials such as ministers, MPs, and senators. In other news, at least 5 civilians have been killed in an attack in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The attack is suspected to have been carried out by the Allied Democratic Forces. Local residents have blamed the United Nations peacekeeping mission for not doing enough to protect civilians in the area as the attack took place near the UN camp. The attack happened a few days after another key leader of a militant group was killed by the DRC military in an ongoing government operation started last month.
I know the slogan of the United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It is protecting civilians, protecting peace. If they really wanted to protect peace, civilians would not have been killed just outside their base. It is almost like they are only here to facilitate the violence, to continue because they say it is necessary to protect the minority people. So, it is perhaps the enemy who kills us. It seems it is the minority people.
Farmers in Ambohitri, Manjaca, Madagascar, say they are boiling with anger over government plans to relocate the capital to the green farmland. Hundreds of farmers are facing off with authorities over a presidential plan that threatens to engulf 1,000 hectares of rice fields. The farmers have since vowed to file a lawsuit against the plan, as they fear losing their ancestral land in Ambohitri, Manjaca. According to the government, the relocation will cost more than $600 million and create 200,000 jobs. Overcrowding, traffic jams, garbage pileups, and rapidly growing slums have prompted the government to move the capital from Antananarivo.
We will not exchange our land for money, nor will we agree to move, because the rice fields have supported us and our ancestors. The sales help finance our daily needs and pay for our children's schooling. And when the rice harvest is over and I don't earn enough, I just can sell my crop.
More stories coming up, so stay with us.
The Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transform the world today. Mondays, only on Telesur.
Thank you for joining us again. The death toll from Israeli strikes on the occupied Gaza Strip has risen to 22. Palestine's Ministry of Health confirmed that at least 22 people have been killed since Tuesday morning. The strikes have also left dozens of people with serious injuries. Gaza residents have accused Israel of targeting residential buildings, contrary to its claim that it is only targeting Hamas. installations. Meanwhile, the Arab League has said attacks are an attempt by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to revive his political fortunes after failing to form a coalition government after the September elections. Protesters in Lebanon poured onto the streets of Beirut on Tuesday night after President Michel Aoun announced that the formation of a new government would be delayed. In a televised interview, Aoun said it could take time to set a date for consultations with heads of parliamentary blocs for the naming of a new prime minister. He added that the best option is for a new cabinet to be made up of politicians and technocrats. But demonstrators argue that further delays will be keeping corrupt leaders in government.
We are here for rightful demands. All the universities have united in one march, despite all their differences, to demand our basic rights. All the young people are energized and full of birth to return this country to how it was, and even better.
Hundreds of protesters took to the streets of Nigeria's capital, Abuja, calling for the release of a prominent journalist. Omoyele Sowore was arrested in August after calling for protests against the president. He has since been detained despite the judiciary ordering his release. Outside the headquarters of the Department of State Services, demonstrators were heard shouting, "DSS, obey the court," and Nigerians say no to tyranny. Leaders from the Sahel region in Africa have appealed for international support to ensure peace prevails. Speaking during a peace summit in France, region leaders blamed the lack of solidarity from the international community for the existence of the G5 Sahel forces, who are currently maintaining security in Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Mauritania and Niger. The G5 Sahel forces were formed in 2014 to strengthen security between the 5 countries, but have been struggling due to lack of funding ever since.
The question that we ask, why are the joint forces of G5 of the Sahel not yet operational? But with what can we take these G5 forces operational? With our means? All the more so, when other forces are better equipped than our armies. There you see the difference.
The mayor of Venice has declared a state of emergency after the second highest tide recorded in the city flooded its historic basilica and left many squares and alleyways submerged in this Italian city. A flood alarm was also sounded across the city as high waters peaked at nearly 2 meters. Much of Italy has been hit with torrential rains in recent days, causing widespread flooding. Police in Hong Kong have warned that the rule of law has been pushed to the brink of total collapse after more than 5 months of violent protests. The warning came as protesters clashed with police across the city and students vandalized property at the University of Hong Kong.
Wreaked havoc in different universities. In the most alarming incident, rioters threw chairs and traffic cones from a footbridge onto the moving vehicles underneath near to the University of Hong Kong. The chairs dropped from the bridge, hit the feet of an innocent motorbike driver, causing him to lose balance. It's clearly a murderous act that could have killed the poor innocent driver. This shows rioters' violence is not only reckless, but also random. Anyone could have been the next victim without any prior warning.
Hundreds gathered outside the U.S. Supreme Court in defense of the DACA immigration program, which benefits hundreds of thousands of young immigrants. On Tuesday, the court began hearing arguments in favor of the program, which has allowed close to 700,000 people who entered the U.S. With no papers as children to stay in the country. The program expired last year after Congress failed to come up with a replacement and has been under attack by U.S. President Donald Trump, who wants it terminated. The final decision is not expected until next year at the height of the U.S. election season.
I'm here for me and my fellow dreamers' dreams. We've had a very long fight and we keep fighting. This is our home. This is all we know. This is what we love. We're American just like everybody else. And it overwhelms me that even though Trump's effort to separate us, we're here together fighting for one dream, which is the American dream.
Yeah. And we leave you with a message of solidarity for Bolivian President Evo Morales from the musician and the founder of Pink Floyd, Roger Waters.
Evo Morales, if you see this, more power to you. I hope your exile is short. Your people need you. They need a leader like you. You're the first indigenous leader in the whole of South America. You've done a great job. You've pulled so many of your people out of poverty and given them a sense of dignity and worth. You brought the rule of law and you brought democracy. And that, hopefully, only on a temporary basis, has been ripped away from them by greed.
And with that message, we end our news brief. But remember, you can find all of our stories by checking our website, telesurenglish.net. And you can also join us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.
Who's moving the chessmen?